All right, we came online a little early, just to let everybody know that the broadcast will start a little after 1. So we have a chance for folks to come on in.
Can you all hear me?
We sure can, Whitney. So your audio is working.
Oh, that was Candy, but for a moment I thought my headset was dead, but it turns out you were all just quiet.
Yeah, so we did get kicked off a little bit early. It is 2 minutes till, and we are live. So still waiting a little while for people to file on in before we actually go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you much.
All right, just to let everybody know that we'll get started in about 2 minutes here, so we'll start about 1:02. Give everybody a chance to log in. Okay, great. I think we can get started. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll give folks a minute or two to keep joining. Really excited to let you know that to invite you to this or welcome you to this webinar. Um, Looking at the economic impact of farm to school programs in Louisiana. We know a lot of our users are interested in farm to school, farm to table, local agriculture issues, and we happen to have an expert on that on staff. So today's webinar is going to be presented by Whitney McKinzie. She's a customer success manager here at IMPLAN, and I'm Bjorn Markeson, the academic division executive and economist here. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items as we get started. We like to keep the webinars interactive, allowing attendees to ask questions to our presenters. Today's presentation will likely take close to 50 minutes. So we ask that if you do have a question related to the topic, please use the question box in GoToWebinar. Our team will do the best to monitor the question box throughout the presentation. If you think you might want to ask a question, make sure that you have the control panel open by hitting the orange arrow on the upper left portion of the pop-out window. And at the conclusion of the presentation, if we don't get to answer your question within the time frame of the webinar, we'll personally have somebody follow up and reach out to make sure you get a response. So with that, take it away, Whitney.
Thank you, Bjorn. So like Bjorn said, my name is Whitney McKinzie, a customer success manager here at IMPLAN. And this presentation is actually based off of my work that I did in my master's thesis. So first, I want to start by acknowledging a few individuals from the Louisiana State University Agricultural Center who were very important throughout the process of this whole project. I want to acknowledge Dr. Maria Bompasudu and Dr. Matthew Fannin for their support and guidance towards the completion of the project. And I would also like to acknowledge some representatives from the Seeds to Success Louisiana Farm to School program for their assistance throughout the data collection process. And I would also like to note that funding for this project was provided under the Louisiana Farm to School program grant, which is an interagency agreement between the LSU Ag Center and the Louisiana Department of Education. And it's sponsored by the Louisiana Department of Education and the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Service. So what will we be going over today? We'll start with discussing some basic information about farm to school programs, and then we'll go over how to estimate the economic impacts of local procurement in school districts. After this, we'll go over how to adjust margins in IMPLAN, and finally, we'll go over some policy implications of local procurement and farm to school programs. So first, I'm going to give an overview of farm to school programs. Farm to school programs are initiatives that are participated in by schools with the intent to promote healthy lifestyle choices among children and introduce agricultural lessons into school curriculums. They're a subcomponent of the National School Lunch Program, and they actually began as a grassroots movement in 1996 in Connecticut, Florida, and California. And the goal here was to improve the nutritional quality of school meals because some parents and school administrators felt that meals served in the cafeterias were unhealthy because of the high amounts of sugar and fats in them. And farm to school programs have actually become fairly popular since 1996. The program reached 23.6 million students in the US in 2015, and that number almost doubled in 2019 to 42.8 million students. And there are three basic components to farm to school programs. So the first is school gardens, which provides students with an interactive way to learn about agriculture and allow them to grow food for themselves. The second component is educational activities, and this includes farm field trips, farmer presentations, tasting demonstrations, etc. And these are presented to students to increase agricultural and nutritional literacy. And the last component is local procurement, and this is designed to allow school cafeterias to purchase locally sourced food products and make them available for school lunches. And it's important to note here that not every school's farm to school program is the same, and each program can have a different mixture of these basic components. So there are three overarching goals of farm to school program implementation, and those are improving the health of students, integrating agriculture into school curriculums, and creating economic opportunities for local farmers. And research shows that the achievement of these goals creates social, educational, and economic effects. The social effects can be seen in both schools and community. So in terms of schools, social benefits include reduced behavioral issues in students, as well as increased nutritional literacy. And in terms of communities, this includes social capital investments from those local procurement purchases with farmers. And the educational effects are tied to enriched educational experiences for students by providing them with those hands-on learning opportunities. And the economic effects are tied to the expansion of operations and market and risk diversification for farmers, as well as stimulation of the local economy. So at the national level, there were 453 bills and resolutions introduced pertaining to farm to school programs and local procurement between 2002 and 2018. So some of the common types of legislation that were introduced related to activity funding, and this activity funding comes from federal and state governments, general school funds, school food service funds, local and private grants, in-kind contributions, and private donations. And other legislation that was related to farm to school and local procurement dealt with nutritional and agricultural education and school gardens. And about 46% of the bills and resolutions were passed during 2002 to 2018. And at the state level, Louisiana actually has some of the highest levels of political support and advocacy for farm to school programs in the US. So between 2002 and 2018, there were 8 governmental policies passed that supported local procurement and farm to school programs. And these policies created boards in Louisiana, such as the Sustainable Local Food Council, and also established a statewide farm to school program. Farm to school programs have specifically grown in popularity and implementation in Louisiana in the last 10 or so years. And this information comes from the 2013, 2015, and 2019 Farm to School Census. And the Farm to School Census is administered by the USDA, and it aims to capture data regarding schools' ideas, interests, implementation history of farm to school programs, and implementation of those activities into students' daily routines. And it also documents some challenges that school districts face when working with local producers, trying to procure those local products for students. And it's also important to note here that the information from the farm to school census is recorded at the school district level. It's not recorded at the individual school level. And also, the number of farm to school programs is representative of the number of schools participating in farm to school activities. So during the 2011-2012 school year, there were 59 documented farm to school programs in 13 school districts in 13 parishes in Louisiana. And this increased in the 2013 to 2014 school year to 152 farm to school programs in 13 school districts and 13 parishes. And we see a substantial increase in the 2018-2019 school year, as there were 606 farm to school programs implemented in 37 different school districts and 34 parishes throughout Louisiana. And as you can see, most of the farm to school programs in Louisiana are located in the southern region of the state. And these tables just show some commonly indicated activities and challenges of school districts who participate in farm to school programs. So local procurement is the most common activity, with 65% of school districts participating in that activity during the 2018-2019 school year. And this is part of the reason why we're focusing on it during this presentation. But the main reason being is that it's the best way to capture economic activity of farm to school programs due to the monetary transactions that are taking place. And other commonly indicated activities include tasting demonstrations, implementing school gardens, and farm field trips. There are also some challenges that school districts experienced with farm to school program participation, and these are primarily associated with local procurement. So the most common challenge faced is difficulty in finding local products year-round, with 52% of farm to school participants experiencing this. And we do expect this because of the increase in local procurement participation. And other common challenges include difficulty in finding local items from primary vendors, vendors not offering a wide enough range of local products, and high product prices. So the map on the left depicts associations between agricultural production, farm-to-school program presence and concentration, and urbanicity in Louisiana. So first we can see that there are high concentrations of farm-to-school programs are primarily located in more urban areas, which are classified as suburban and city. And this is consistent with what we've seen in previous research and observations throughout multiple channels of farm to school literature. So in terms of procurement, school districts in urbanized areas may have a wider access to locally produced products because they could be available through farmers, vendors, and distributors in a specific area. But school districts that are located in more rural areas may only have the option to purchase locally sourced products from producers, and they might not be available from vendors and distributors in that area. And the crops depicted in the map are highly requested products from Louisiana school districts that participate in farm to school programs. And they also have sufficient production capacity in Louisiana, which is why we're focusing on these. So, and we can see that agricultural production has a slight association with farm to school program presence. So for example, there's a lot of rice production. Rice is the yellow crop in the map. So rice production is prominent in the southwest, central, and northeastern regions of Louisiana. And there are some school districts, such as Lafayette Parish, who requested rice as a part of their farm to school program, and they're also located in an area with ample amounts of rice production. But there are other school districts, such as St. Bernard Parish, that requested rice, but they're not located in any of those regions. And also from the farm to school census, we know that fruits and vegetables are highly requested products for farm to school programs in general. And we can see that in Louisiana, vegetable production had a $79 million gross farm value, and fruit production had a $41 million gross value. Both of those are from 2018. So the objective of this presentation is to estimate the economic impacts of increased levels of local procurement in 2 different Louisiana school districts as a part of farm to school programs. And these school districts serve approximately 45,000 to 60,000 students per year individually, and spend anywhere between $4 million and $6 million on their primary yearly food expenditure budget. And we're going to measure this economic impact through 2 different scenarios. So we're going to measure through a baseline scenario and an impact scenario. And Louisiana is actually pretty interesting because they purchase a lot of their products from local wholesalers. And the baseline will help us measure what their current contribution to the Louisiana economy is through these current purchases. And the impact scenario is what will estimate the economic impact of increased levels of local procurement in school districts. So this will be captured through substituting traditionally sourced products for a locally sourced alternative. And by traditionally sourced product, I mean the way that a product is currently being purchased. So for example, if a school district is purchasing rice that's produced in Missouri, this would be a traditionally sourced product, and the locally sourced alternative would be rice that's grown in Louisiana. So next I'm going to go through a little bit about the data collection process. So IMPLAN has annual data sets that are comprised of data from various sources, such as the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, among many others. And in this data set, there are 546 industries that are based on the North American Industry Classification Coding System. And specifically, there are 19 industries that represent agricultural production and 45 industries that represent food manufacturing. The administrative data that we collected comes in the form of food expenditure solicitations and corresponding bid awards from the 2019-2020 school year. And we chose this school year because it was the last quote unquote normal purchasing year before COVID. And here I worked really closely with the Seeds to Success Louisiana Farm to School Program team to get this information, and it was collected via email from the school district child nutrition program directors. So the food expenditure solicitations contain a bunch of different information. They have information regarding requested food items, approved brands, and the quantities requested by schools. And the quantity estimates are based on student enrollment and also nutritional requirements that are set forth by the USDA. And school districts must adhere to those requirements. And it's also important to note here that not every solicitation follows a standard outline. So each solicitation is different depending on the school district. But those are the core components that are in every solicitation. The corresponding food bid award contains information on the winning bidder for each product, the food items that will be received, total per unit prices of each food item, and the quantities of each item received. And the winning bidders for each product are generally selected by the lowest cost option. So whichever wholesaler can provide the lowest price is the wholesaler they're going to go with. Again, for the primary data collection, I worked really closely with the Seeds to Success team to collect the primary data for this project. So the primary data was collected in the form of individual interviews with child nutrition program directors, and they are the ones that oversee the food expenditure solicitation, and they're the ones that approve that. So that's why those individuals were chosen to be interviewed. So in the interview, they were asked different questions about their average daily meal participation, their current procurement process, the extent to which they currently practice local procurement, their interest in increasing their levels of local procurement, and meal substitutions. So for the meal substitutions specifically, they were asked to identify the rate at which they believed specific products could be substituted out for a locally sourced alternative. So the products that we chose to analyze in this project were strawberries, rice, sweet potatoes, smoked sausage, oranges, Cajun seasoning, hot sauce, cabbage, and lettuce. And we chose these products based on how often they were served in school cafeterias. These are pretty commonly served items in cafeterias, and because of their production capacity in Louisiana. So in Louisiana, these are produced quite often and in ample amounts. So next, we'll discuss the methodology in this project. So the IMPLAN data in this project is used in the input-output analysis conducted by the IMPLAN software. And an input-output analysis just analyzes the interdependence of industries. So the premise of this analysis is that when money enters an economy through a transaction, it's respent in another sector later on. The administrative data that we collected from the food expenditure solicitations and awards is used to construct the baseline scenarios, which measure the current contribution of school district level local procurement. And we're measuring this because, like I mentioned earlier, Louisiana school districts purchase products from Louisiana-based wholesalers, so they are making a contribution to the state economy currently, and we kind of wanted to figure that out to be able to compare that to what the increased levels would look like. And the primary data that we collected from the child nutrition program director interviews is used in the impact scenarios, which is what actually estimates the economic impact of the increased levels of local procurement in Louisiana. So, and we used this data to customize and enhance the baseline scenario, and this is what creates that impact scenario. So next, I'm going to talk about some of the adjustments that I had to make to the model for this specific project. So the main adjustment I had to make dealt with adjusting the margins in order to reflect the conditions of my project. So first off, a margin is just the value of additional services provided to commodities through different components of the value chain. And so there's 4 different components of the value chain, and therefore 4 different types of margins, which are production, transportation, wholesale, and retail. And the figure in this slide just shows a visual representation of the value chain. And one important distinction that you need to know when you're using IMPLAN is the difference between producer and purchaser prices and how margins are applied to each of these. So the producer price is the price a producer receives for creating a good or fulfilling a service. And the purchaser price is the price that a final consumer pays for that good or service. An IMPLAN has a set of default margin coefficients that are based on a national average, and those default margin coefficients are automatically applied to values denoted as purchaser prices. So since Louisiana school districts purchase products from wholesalers, the embedded IMPLAN margins need to be adjusted to reflect this purchasing situation. So in this case, I'm going to eliminate the retail margin and some of the transportation margins that don't apply here, specifically the water and air transportation margins. And so to do this in IMPLAN, IMPLAN actually has a cool feature that was recently released that allows you to go in and adjust margins in the software program. And so once you fill out your event title, type, specification, and value, you can click on the advanced fields, which is the hexagon shaped icon right here. And you can edit your margins from there by clicking on this edit button next to the margins. And it's important to note here that if your commodity is being purchased via a wholesaler or retailer, then you would select your purchaser, you would select the purchaser price option. Since this is the price that final consumers are buying the item at. And since school districts are purchasing products via a wholesaler, I would select the purchaser price option in this scenario. So once you click the edit button, you're brought to this screen. So this just shows you each of the values of the margins. So for example, I looked at the vegetable and melon industry. And so the production margin for this industry is 54%. The wholesale margin is 17%, and so on and so forth. And like I mentioned before, Louisiana school districts purchase products from Louisiana-based wholesalers, so I have to eliminate the retail air transportation and water transportation margins. So what I would do is just set those margins equal to 0 in IMPLAN. And then I would click renormalize up at the top at the screen, and IMPLAN will do the rest for you from there. Unfortunately, when I was doing this analysis a few months back in my grad program, this feature was not available. So I had to manually adjust the margins myself. So to do this, I had to download the Excel sheets with the margins from the IMPLAN support website. And on the left is a screenshot of the Excel sheet with all of the original margins. So then I had to go in and delete the retail and appropriate transportation margins from this. And once those margins were deleted, then I had to renormalize the margin values myself. And this is done by summing up the margin value minus the retail and transportation margins that I deleted, and then dividing each margin value by the new sum of margins. So then I had to take these adjusted margins and apply them to the values I was inputting into IMPLAN. But thankfully, you don't have to do this anymore, and adjusting the margins is as easy as setting whichever margins aren't applicable to your model to 0, and IMPLAN takes care of the rest. So here are some of the results for this project. So this table shows the current local purchases of the first school district. So this school district purchased products that were both wholesaled and produced in Louisiana, specifically rice, smoked sausage, and taco seasoning. The baseline commodity output column here represents the IMPLAN specification associated with each commodity based on the way it's currently being purchased. So for example, this school district doesn't purchase strawberries from a local wholesaler or a local producer. So this purchase is non-local and it's not included in the baseline scenario. Rice is purchased via a local producer. So the specification for rice is 3066. Smoked sausage is bought via a local wholesaler. So the specification is 3398, which is grocery wholesale. And the impact commodity output column over here represents the specifications for each commodity in the impact scenario. So here it's assumed that each commodity is being purchased directly from a producer as a part of farm to school programs. So for example, strawberries and oranges would have the specification 3004, which is fruit, and sweet potatoes, cabbage, and lettuce would have the specification 3003, which is vegetable and melons. So this is the event page in IMPLAN for the baseline scenario. Remember, the baseline scenario is showing the contributions of this district's current local purchases to the Louisiana economy. Here I only have events for rice, smoked sausage, and taco seasoning. because these were the only products that were locally produced or wholesaled. So the value that I'm putting into the model for each event depends on where the product was purchased from. So for example, rice was purchased directly from the producer. So I took the producer margin, multiplied it by the total amount spent on rice for the district, and that's the value that I put into the IMPLAN model. Smoked sausage was purchased via a Louisiana-based wholesaler, but it wasn't produced in Louisiana. So I multiplied the wholesale margin by the total amount spent on smoked sausage for the district, and I used that value into the model. The taco seasoning was both produced in Louisiana and purchased via a Louisiana-based wholesaler. So for this, I separated the production and the wholesale into two separate events. So that's why you see taco seasoning having two separate events right here. And I applied each margin to the total amount spent on taco seasoning, and those are the values that I used in the IMPLAN model. So I multiplied the production value for the taco seasoning production event, and then the wholesale margin for the taco seasoning wholesale event. So, and I'm using the 2019 data year because these purchases were made in 2019. And I do want to note here that I'm selecting producer price in the advanced field here because I already applied the margins to each value manually, and I don't want IMPLAN to automatically apply those margins. But again, with the new margin editing feature in IMPLAN, you don't have to do it like this anymore. It's much easier. So local procurement in School District 1 provides about $13,257 in direct output effects, which reflects the direct spending by the district on rice, taco seasoning, and smoked sausage purchases. Indirect output effects equal about $8,113, and this captures the business-to-business spending on inputs to produce these products. Induced output effects of these purchases total about $3,600, and this reflects the household spending of employees in each of these industries and their suppliers. And the total output effects equal about $24,970. In terms of employment, 12/100ths of one job is supported by these local procurement purchases, and about $5,920 is generated in labor income, which represents all form of employment income, and value added, which measures the contribution to GDP, is about $8,826. So based on the child nutrition program director interviews, this school district indicated that they would be willing to substitute 100% of their rice, smoked sausage, lettuce, sweet potato, taco seasoning, and cabbage purchases for a locally sourced alternative. And this particular district already purchases locally sourced rice directly from the producer, so this event will eventually be zeroed out in the long run. And this district also noted that they would be willing to substitute 50% of their strawberry and orange purchases for a locally sourced alternative, and the other 50% would still be purchased through a non-local wholesaler, and it's not produced in Louisiana. So this is the event page for the impact scenario in School District 1. So for this scenario, I had to adjust the margins again and eliminate the wholesaler margin, and then renormalize them because we're assuming that these products were purchased directly from the producer. But the process for creating these events are the same as in the baseline scenario. I chose the commodity output event type because I know exactly what product is being purchased. The event specification coincides with the commodity. And again, I just took the total amount that was spent on each product and then multiplied it by the corresponding production margin because we're assuming that products are purchased directly from the producer. And that's where I got each of the event values. And again, I'm selecting producer price because I already manually applied those margins and I don't want IMPLAN to do it again. So the increased levels of local procurement in School District 1 generate about $83,396 in direct output effects, $44,336 in indirect output effects, and $15,359 in induced output effects, for a total of $143,091. About 6,300ths of one job is supported by these purchases. and $25,189 is generated in labor income, and $39,366 is generated in value added. So the net changes just measure the difference between the baseline and the impact scenarios, and it helps to give a clearer picture of the impact of the increased levels of local procurement, which is why I included it. So we can see that total employment increases by 5,100. Labor income increases by $19,269. Value added increases by $30,541, and output increases by $118,121. Another way to look at the results is through multipliers. So you can calculate this multiplier by dividing the total output effects by the initial effects. So for the baseline scenario, this gives you 0.26, which means that for every dollar spent on local rice, taco seasoning, and smoked sausage purchases, Louisiana retains only 26 cents in total economic benefits. So the remaining 74 cents becomes a leakage, meaning that Louisiana loses 74 cents worth of local effects for every dollar spent on local procurement in this scenario. However, when this district increases its level of local procurement in the impact scenario, the multiplier increases to 1.48, which means that for every $1 spent by this district on local procurement, an additional 48 cents of economic benefits is generated on top of that in the Louisiana economy. So the increased levels of local procurement by School District 1 would generate an additional $1.22 for every $1 spent on local procurement when it's compared to the baseline scenario. So moving on to School District 2, this table shows the current purchases of the second school district. This particular district purchases a lot of products via a Louisiana-based wholesaler. So a lot of the products they purchase aren't actually produced in Louisiana, but this district does purchase locally produced Cajun seasoning and hot sauce. So the baseline and impact commodity output columns here and here follow the same format as School District 1. So for example, this district's rice purchases are from a local wholesaler, but it's not locally produced. So the baseline commodity output corresponds to the grocery wholesale industry, and the impact commodity output column corresponds to rice production. So this is the IMPLAN event page for the baseline scenario of School District 2. It's very similar to that of School District 1. Each commodity is represented by a different event. I'm using the commodity event type because I know which product is being purchased, and the event specification corresponds to that specific food product. Again, to find the event values, I'm just taking the adjusted margin and multiplying that by the total amount spent on each product. So for example, since rice was locally wholesale but not locally produced, I just took the wholesale margin for rice and multiplied it by the total amount spent on rice for that year and put that value into IMPLAN. And I selected producer price because I manually applied the margins already. And I just repeated that process for every commodity that I'm analyzing here. And again, I'm using the 2019 dollar year because these purchases were made in 2019. So local procurement in School District 2 provides about $5,949 in direct output effects, which again reflect the direct spending by the district on the purchases of these commodities. Indirect output effects equal about $2,818, which captures the business-to-business spending on inputs used to produce the commodities. Induced output effects of these purchases totals about $2,155, and this just reflects household spending of employees in each of these industries and their suppliers, and the total output effects equal $10,922. So in terms of employment, 7/100 of one job is supported by these local procurement purchases. And about $3,458 and $5,342 is generated in labor income and value added, respectively. So based on the interview with this specific child nutrition program director, this district indicated that they'd be willing to substitute out 100% of their rice, smoked sausage, Cajun seasoning, and hot sauce purchases for a locally sourced alternative. And this district also noted that they would be willing to substitute 50% of their strawberry, sweet potato, and orange purchases for a locally sourced alternative, and the other 50% would still be purchased through the Louisiana-based wholesaler, but it wouldn't actually be produced in Louisiana. So this is the impact page for School District 2. It's the same as in School District 1, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just to go over it again, each commodity is its own separate event. I had to renormalize the margins to eliminate the wholesale margin because we're assuming that these are purchased directly from the producer. And then I applied those margin values to the total amount spent on each commodity and used that for the event value. So the increased levels of local procurement in School District 1 generate about $31,524 in direct output effects, $17,352 in indirect output effects, and $6,602 in induced output effects for a total output of $55,478. About 2,900ths of one job is supported by these purchases, and $10,826 is generated in labor income, and $17,692 is generated in value added. So for the net changes, we see that the total employment increases by 2,200ths, labor income increases by 7,278, value added increases by 12,350, and output increases by $44,556. So the baseline multiplier for the second school district is 0.25. So this means that for every $1 spent on local procurement by this district, there's only 25 cents in benefits to the Louisiana economy. The remaining 75 cents becomes a leakage, meaning that Louisiana loses 75 cents worth of local effects for every dollar spent on local procurement in this scenario. But when this district increases its level of local procurement, the multiplier increases to 1.26. So for every $1 spent by this district on local procurement, an additional 26 cents is generated in the local economy. So increased levels of local procurement by the second school district would generate an additional $1.01 for every $1 spent on local procurement when compared to the corresponding baseline scenario. So lastly, I'll discuss some conclusions and future directions for this analysis and also other analyses that are similar to this one. So the results of this analysis show that increased levels of local procurement in Louisiana school districts create measurable economic contributions and impacts to the state economy. And these results are pretty consistent with other statewide local procurement economic impact studies. So the multipliers for each of these districts fell into the same range as some of those other studies. And the results can be used to bridge the information gap between producers, school districts, policymakers, and other members of the community, and provide information about local procurement opportunities. And they can also be used in extension and outreach publications to help create farm-to-school policies and legislation. And there's also a few limitations to this work that I want to point out. So first of all, input-output analyses have a static framework, so that's just something important to keep in mind. Second of all, we used a small sample size, so we only have 2 school districts here, and they were both in metropolitan areas. So to get a better understanding of the state as a whole, it would probably benefit to have a larger sample and look at both rural and urban school districts. And lastly, we didn't account for any additional costs that could be incurred. So for example, if a school district needed additional kitchen equipment or more skilled labor or something like that to prepare the locally sourced alternative, we didn't account for that in this particular study, but that would be something interesting to look into. So future directions. Some future directions for this particular study are you could measure the economic impact of other farm-to-school activities, such as farm field trips. Like I mentioned in the last slide, you could also include a larger sample size. So this would include looking at both rural and urban school districts. And you could also include private and charter schools into this. So private and charter schools actually have pretty high participation rates in farm to school programs. So it would be interesting to see their contributions to this as well. You could also look at this from a smaller geographic region. So if you wanted to look at this on a per parish or county perspective, you can also do an MRIO analysis, which is a multi-regional input-output analysis. So you can look at this from a parish relative to the state perspective. And this study can also lay the groundwork for other economic impact studies dealing with agritourism and other farm to institution programs, which include childcare institutions, so like daycares, hospitals, etc. So Bjorn, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Whitney. So we've got a bunch of questions in on the question page, and we can start kind of working through those. If you have other questions as well, go ahead and post them into the question box, and we'll get to those. Any questions we don't get to, in the interest of time, we will definitely follow up with either myself or one of the other IMPLAN reps will reach out to you. All right, Whitney, we got some questions for you. The first one is from Paul Lewin. The question is, all production sold to the schools is considered new. That is, farmers do not substitute away from another market. Yeah, so I believe that all the local purchases are new as they're replacing imports from outside of Louisiana, right, Whitney?
Yes, that's correct.
The second is how is the subsidy paid? If it's paid from taxes, households in the region would have fewer dollars to spend on other items. So subsidies are always a big part of ag, and we see this every year. And this is one of the ways that those subsidies are used and seen in the economy. So that's kind of where that's occurring. Question 3, wholesalers or distributors are negatively impacted if schools buy directly from farmers. Do you estimate that effect? I can take the first part of this one. The loss to local wholesalers is going to be pretty minimal in this, and I believe looking at those net losses to them was outside the scope of your master's thesis, right, Whitney?
Yeah, it was. So that was something that we considered to include in this analysis, but just given some of the constraints of my program, we didn't really have the time to look at that. But that could also be an extension of this study to kind of look and see what the gains to producers would be versus the loss from wholesalers. So yeah, definitely a good point to bring up and something you can do in the future.
Okay. Two more points. One, just to clarify based on a question that came in, you were careful not to double count when you did the margining manually, correct?
Correct. So that's why I talked about the difference between producer and purchaser prices. So IMPLAN automatically applies those margins to the purchaser price. But since I had to manually adjust for those margins, I went ahead and selected the producer price in my scenario or in my specific project to make sure that I didn't double count those margins because IMPLAN doesn't apply those margins to the producer price.
Okay, great. Thanks. Todd Schmidt asked for a citation for your thesis or journal articles published from it. Todd, I'll follow up with you directly or have Whitney follow up with that information. Let's see, we've got one in here from Tom Harris. I know some hospitals are trying to grow their own vegetables and purchase locally. This would be the same analysis could be applied, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that this, the framework of this analysis could be applied to other studies similar, so other farm to institution, including hospitals. Again, with the changes in IMPLAN, so specifically that those adjusting the margins feature, you would have to do that a little bit differently. But yeah, the basic framework of this could definitely be applied to that.
So this one's from Mariela Calvo. 2 questions. I can take the first one, and then I'll pass the second one to you. The first one is why our employment numbers are shown as a decimal number. This comes up fairly regularly as a question, and there are 2 reasons. One is it's representing fractions of a job, right? So the employment we're looking at is essentially person-year jobs, and this is indicating that is a fraction of a person, a job held by a person per year. The other reason that I think it's useful too is to see that those, as a decimal, that this is an estimated value, right? That this is we're not giving you a number that is rounded, but just an estimated value to keep that clear. And the second part of the question is, what do you mean, and Whitney, this is for you, what do you mean by adjusting the margins or renormalizing?
So I will go back. I don't know if I can. Yeah. So by adjusting the margins, I mean eliminating some of the margins that aren't applicable to my study. So for example, in this slide right here, Louisiana school districts purchase products directly from a wholesaler. So they don't go through a retailer at all. So this retail margin is not applicable to my study. And also there are certain transportation margins like water and air transportation margins that wouldn't apply here. So I'm getting rid of those because I don't need them because they're not included here. And then renormalizing them just means all of these margin values, when you sum them together, they equal 1. So it's 100%. It's accounting for 100% of each of the components in the value chain. And so renormalizing them just means giving them a different value based on the margins that you need to ensure that the sum of margins still equals 1.
Thank you. The next question is from Julian Silk. Could Louisiana do a program like this with fish produced by aquaculture, and would it be possible to measure the impact in a similar way?
I would think so. Do you mean in terms of farm to school programs or a specific program dedicated to aquaculture?
Like a farm, maybe like a fishery to school program or something similar like that.
Yeah, I think if you were to measure like the economic impacts of, selling seafood or, aquaculture products to schools, I definitely think you could do this in the same way. Yeah, you would just have to, depending on how that product is purchased, if it goes through, wholesale or if it's directly from the producer, that's when you would have to adjust those margins. But yeah, I think the framework of this study would definitely apply to something like that.
Excellent, thank you. So next question from Laura Wolf Powers. Did you determine whether school districts would be paying higher prices for locally sourced food than for imported food?
So we actually made an assumption for this project. So we assumed that either school districts would not be paying more for the locally sourced alternative, or if they did, adjustments would be made in the budget elsewhere, so that we were ensuring that each school district is still adhering by their specific amount that they spent on the food expenditure budget. It would definitely, it's something that we asked actually in the interview that we did, and we are working on a publication that kind of looks into price increases associated with substituting for locally sourced alternatives, but it's not in this specific project, but hopefully something will be coming soon on that.
Excellent. Eva Ringstrom also just mentioned that there are boat to school programs and related fish and seafood to school programs in other states.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
All right, I think that wraps it up for the questions, if I inadvertently missed one, I will make sure to follow up on a later day. Just to kind of think through kind of what we're doing, we do these webinars on a monthly basis, and so we'll have youth topics and watch for those coming into your inbox. We're always also open to other webinar ideas, including projects that you're working on with IMPLAN. So feel free to email us at support@implan.com with ideas. Looking at your support team, if you have additional questions about IMPLAN or questions about this webinar, feel free to email us at support@implan.com, and one of our customer success team members will follow up with you. Colton Hall, Ryder Jarrett Lindy, Meg Phillip, Kiana Saunders, Autumn Steele, or Whitney McKinzie are all happy to help with your IMPLAN related questions. Again, if you're looking for more information about IMPLAN and how to use IMPLAN, support.implan.com is your 24-hour support resource, and you can find recordings of past sessions along with registration for upcoming sessions at on that site. Also, if you're interested in getting a personalized demonstration of IMPLAN, feel free to set that up and schedule at implan.com/demo, or you can email our sales team at sales@implan.com. And these demos are really great for understanding the data that's included in IMPLAN, run through specific projects and ideas that you're thinking about, and then see what metrics are included in the results of an IMPLAN project. All right, well, thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a good rest of your week.